It was in a time long ago, where the winds whispered secrets across the hills and the stars seemed to hold the fate of men and women alike. A time when knights were as bound by honor as they were by love, and where hearts could be both warriors and prisoners of their own desires. A time when the stories of love were more than just tales, they were the very marrow of life itself. And within this vast, sweeping history, there is one tale that stands as a reminder of the boundless and tragic forces of fate. The story of Tristan and Isolde. Imagine yourself, for a moment, living in a world where love was not just a simple choice, but an uncontrollable force, shaped by the very heavens themselves. Picture the lush, rolling green hills of Cornwall, a land where the salty winds from the sea meet the deep forests, and the smell of damp earth fills the air. The land is at once serene and wild, full of mystery and legend, much like the love between Tristan and Isolde, a love that would never truly belong to them. This is not a story of perfect, happily ever after love. No, it is a tale woven with the threads of tragedy, betrayal, and the deepest of desires. A story in which the lovers Tristan, a brave knight, fiercely loyal to his king, and Isolde, a woman of noble birth and impossible beauty, were not meant to be. Yet, despite the force of their circumstances, they became the center of a love story so powerful that even time itself could not erase its impact. But how could such a love come to pass, you might wonder? How could two people so bound by duty, by the weight of honor and the expectations of their worlds, ever be free to love each other without consequence? Was it simply fate that brought them together, or was it the choices they made, the very choices that led to their downfall? This love was not one born in the quiet corners of a peaceful life. No, it was forged in the fires of political alliances, royal expectations, and the very fabric of society's rigid boundaries. Tristan, a knight bound to his king by blood and loyalty, could never have imagined that his fate would intertwine so deeply with that of Isolde. And Isolde, pledged to marry King Mark of Cornwall, a man of noble heart but not her own desire, could not foresee how the threads of destiny would pull her into Tristan's arms, despite the promises she had made. As the stars twinkled overhead, casting their ethereal glow over the earth, Isolde, so beautiful and untouched by the world's demands, found herself caught in a web she had not woven herself. Her father had arranged her marriage to King Mark, for her beauty was seen as a prize, and her heart, though full of longing, was to be a gift given to someone she barely knew. And Tristan, loyal to his uncle, the king, and sworn to uphold the honor of his people, was caught between the call of his duty and the beat of his own heart. And yet, fate had other plans, for it was not through choice or design that their love began, but through a potion, a simple twist of chance. A potion meant for another, a love potion, brewed to ensure that Isolde and King Mark would share a bond of passion and desire, ensuring a marriage that could unite their lands. But in an accidental mix-up, the potion found its way into the hands of Tristan and Isolde, and what should have been a fleeting magical love turned into a powerful, all-consuming force. In the quiet of the night, when the only sounds were the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant call of the ocean, Tristan and Isolde's fates were sealed. The love that bloomed between them was fierce and undeniable, yet also deeply tragic. They were not free to love, not free to choose each other without consequence. For the world around them, the very forces that had brought them together, would never allow them the peace they so desperately sought. And so, here we are, many centuries later, still haunted by their story. A story of love that was both a gift and a curse, of two souls who found each other despite the odds, only to lose everything in the end. A tale of love so pure and intense that it could never be fully contained by the earthly bonds of marriage or loyalty. No, this was a love that transcended time, a love that, in its ultimate tragedy, would be remembered forever. But as you listen to this tale, I want you to consider something. How far can love go? Is it simply a feeling that comes from the heart? Or is it a force, like the wind, that sweeps us off our feet and carries us to places we never expected? Can we control it, or are we, like Tristan and Isolde, simply caught in its flow, unable to fight its pull? And when love and fate collide, can we ever truly escape its grasp? Perhaps these are questions that have no answers, just as there may be no answers for the love that Tristan and Isolde shared. But their story remains, a testament to the powerful forces that guide us through life, forces of destiny, of choice, of love, and of loss. As you drift deeper into the tale, I invite you to think about your own experiences with love, how it has shaped you, how it has carried you, or how it has tested you. Is love truly something that can be controlled, or is it, as Tristan and Isolde found, a force that rules us all? Let your mind wander through the history of this legend and see where it takes you, as we uncover the layers of this timeless, tragic romance together. In the time of Tristan and Isolde, the world they inhabited was one where every action, every word, and every glance was guided by a rigid structure, an invisible web that connected them to the very heart of their kingdom. The land of Cornwall, nestled by the sea with its rolling hills and wild, untamed beauty, was not just a place of natural wonder. It was a kingdom governed by an intricate set of laws, customs, and expectations, all rooted in honor, duty, and tradition. Imagine waking each day in this world, where the weight of responsibility is not only carried by the rulers but by every man and woman who calls this land their home. A knight like Tristan, whose name was already whispered in the halls of noble courts, knew that his life was not his own. From the moment he could hold a sword, his path was set, one of loyalty, protection, and service. His honor was everything. His duty to his king, his family, and his people defined him. These were not mere words to him. They were the very fabric of his existence. Cornwall, with its cold, salty air that carried the scent of the sea, was ruled by King Mark, a man who, though noble and just, was bound by the same societal expectations that kept him distant from the very love that his nephew, Tristan, would find so overwhelming. The king's role, as much as his own desires, was governed by tradition, politics, and the weight of the crown. His heart, though capable of love, was not entirely free to give it as he wished. The land, the people, the title, all were demands he could not escape. But it wasn't just the rulers who were shaped by these forces. The very lives of the common people, the peasants and workers who tilled the land or worked in the markets, were similarly bound by a web of duty. To act outside the bounds of expectation was not only to risk personal shame but the disgrace of one's family. Honor was not just a matter of personal pride. It was the life force that held entire communities together. Now, think of Isolde, a woman of noble birth, whose life was also scripted long before she was even born. Her beauty, her grace, her intelligence. These were treasures not meant for her to cherish for herself, but to be used as bargaining tools in the complex dance of politics. She, like many women of her time, was bound by the choices made for her by those who controlled her fate: her father, her betrothed, her king. Marriage was not something to be entered into for love, as we understand it today. It was a contract, a transaction that shaped alliances and ensured the prosperity of families. Isolde's life, her destiny, was to be shaped by the demands of her father's ambitions and the needs of the kingdom. Women, in the medieval world, had little say in such matters. Their roles were primarily defined by their relationships to the men around them, whether fathers, brothers, or husbands. Though they may have had personal desires, those desires were often secondary to the social and political roles they played. Isolde's beauty, her skill with a harp, and her wisdom were all seen as part of her value in the world. A value that was expected to serve the interests of her family and, by extension, the kingdom. It was a world in which women's personal desires were often set aside in favor of the greater good, and their lives were to be lived according to the rules of those who held power. In Cornwall, a place of such steep tradition, Isolde's role was already decided. She would marry King Mark, who, though a kind and noble man, was not the man her heart had chosen. The marriage was a political alliance, one that would strengthen the power of Cornwall and cement the bond between two noble houses. This was not a love story, not yet. It was a matter of duty. Isolde's personal wishes, her heart's longing, did not have the power to shape the world in which she lived. And what of Tristan? His role as a knight meant that his life was likewise bound by duty. A knight's honor was sacred, sworn to protect the realm, to serve his king, and to defend the kingdom's honor at all costs. Tristan's skill with a sword was not simply a matter of personal pride. It was his responsibility to his people. His courage was not just for the glory of battle, but for the safety of those who depended on him. Knights like Tristan were not free men. They were the enforcers of the king's will, the protectors of the social order. And in return for their service, they were given land, titles, and honor. But those same things often came at a price, one that would be paid in sacrifice. In this world, where honor and duty shaped every action, there was little room for personal desire. A knight could not choose to act on his heart's deepest wish without betraying the very values that made him who he was. Tristan, though young and passionate, had been raised with the understanding that duty came before everything else, before his own happiness, before his desires, and, as he would come to learn, before his love for Isolde. This tension between duty and personal desire, between the needs of the kingdom and the hearts of the individuals within it, was not unique to Tristan and Isolde. It was the very fabric of life in medieval society. It was a time when the individual was often swallowed by the collective, and personal happiness was often the last consideration. The question of what it meant to follow one's heart, or to live in the way one's family and kingdom demanded, was one faced by every man and woman in that time. As we think about Tristan and Isolde, we must consider, how much power did they truly have over their own lives? How much of what they did was driven by their own desires, and how much was shaped by the expectations of the world around them? Can we, from our place in history, truly understand what it meant to live in a time where honor and duty defined your very existence? Reflect for a moment on how this social structure shaped their love. How much of their passion was fated by their roles in the world, and how much of it was a rebellion against the very forces that sought to control them? Can we ever truly escape the weight of our duties, or do they shape us in ways we can never fully comprehend? Perhaps, as you listen, you might think about your own life and the duties you carry. How do they shape your choices, your desires? Are you, like Tristan, bound by a sense of duty? Or do you, like Isolde, feel the weight of expectations placed upon you, even when they conflict with your heart's deepest wishes? Share your thoughts and reflect on the way social duty impacts personal desires, especially for women in history. It was a day like any other, though neither Tristan nor Isolde would ever see it that way. The world around them hummed with the quiet rhythm of life, the distant cries of seagulls in the wind, the rustling of leaves in the trees, and the steady, unyielding pull of the tide against the shore. Yet, in that moment, the air seemed to thrum with something else. Presence. A feeling that neither of them could have explained, yet both would carry with them forever. It was as though the very fabric of time and fate had shifted, bringing them together in a way neither could have foreseen. Tristan had been sent on a mission, one that seemed as ordinary as any other. His loyalty to King Mark was unyielding, and this was simply another task to carry out in service of the crown. The journey to the distant shores of Ireland, however, was different. It was not a battlefield nor a diplomatic venture, but a simple errand, a task involving Isolde, the woman who would one day be his king's bride. A woman, he had heard, of such beauty and grace that it was said even the gods themselves might take notice. Yet Tristan, loyal as he was, had never considered her in any way other than as an object of duty, nothing more than a future queen whose marriage to King Mark would solidify peace. And then, in the most unassuming of places, their paths crossed. It was a moment that could never be replicated, not in its fullness, not in its weight. The first time their eyes met, it was not with the blinding recognition of destiny, but with the quiet, curious acknowledgement that two lives, until that point separate, had somehow been brought together. The scene unfolded at the docks of an Irish port, the air filled with the tang of salt water and the soft murmur of voices. Tristan's eyes were fixed on the horizon, watching the ships as they neared the shore, each bringing with it not just goods, but the possibilities of alliances and futures entwined. But as his gaze swept over the crowd, it caught on her. A figure stepping down from the ship, her beauty undeniable even from a distance. Isolde. She stood tall and proud, her presence commanding even the air around her. The wind lifted her golden hair, making it shimmer like strands of sunlight caught in the sea breeze. Her green gown, embroidered with intricate patterns, seemed to flow around her as though she were a part of the very earth she walked upon. Her eyes, too, were like the sea, deep, mysterious, and boundless. Yet there was something more in them, something that called to him in a way he could not explain. For a moment, Tristan stood frozen, caught between the world he knew and this new, unexpected force. His heart, loyal to his king and his duty, urged him to step forward, to remain focused on the task at hand. But his body, his very being, seemed to defy that. He took a step closer, almost involuntarily, as though his feet had been guided by something other than his mind. And then, as if drawn by the same pull, Isolde's eyes met his. A flicker of recognition passed between them, an unspoken understanding that neither of them could explain, but both would feel for the rest of their lives. There, in that brief, quiet moment, the world seemed to pause. The sounds of the port faded into the background. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. It was as though time itself had bent, weaving their paths together with invisible threads, and neither Tristan nor Isolde could have escaped the pull if they had tried. As their gazes held, the emotions stirred in them were not the fiery passion they would later know, but something much subtler, much deeper. There was intrigue in Isolde's eyes, a curiosity, perhaps, about the stranger before her. And in Tristan's, there was something else, a recognition not of the woman, but of the profound change that had begun in that moment. This was not a meeting by chance. This was fate, and neither of them could escape it. Isolde turned her head away first, breaking the connection. She glanced briefly at her attendants, who were already gathering her belongings, and then back toward Tristan. But in that fleeting exchange, in that single glance, something had been planted in both their hearts. A seed that would grow into something neither of them could have prepared for. As Tristan moved forward, his steps seemed heavier than before. The task he had come for, delivering a message, meeting with her father, felt distant now, as though something much more important had just occurred, though he could not name it. His heart, though still loyal to King Mark, now felt a different kind of pull. Was it loyalty? Was it duty? Or was it something deeper, something that had no name yet? The question lingered in his mind, but he pushed it away. After all, what could it mean? She was destined to marry King Mark, not him. Their worlds were so far apart, and yet, as for Isolde, she too felt it, the weight of what had just passed between them. She had been taught all her life to control her emotions, to suppress the stirrings of her heart in favor of what was expected of her. She was a woman of great beauty, yes, but also of duty. Her life was not hers to shape. Her marriage to King Mark was not a choice. It was a decision made for the good of her family and her kingdom. And yet, in that single glance, something shifted within her. Was this what her heart had longed for, even when she did not know it? Was this the man she had been waiting for, even if it was not a love she could ever act upon? The moments after that meeting were filled with tension, the air thick with unspoken words, with emotions neither Tristan nor Isolde could easily define. Their duties, their fates, still lay before them. But something had changed. Something had been set in motion, like a ship setting sail in the dark, unknown waters of fate. And so, their paths were set on a new course, one neither of them could have imagined that day at the docks. The story of Tristan and Isolde, of their love, their fate, their loss, had begun. Not with a grand gesture, not with a fiery passion, but with a quiet meeting, a glance that neither could forget, and a question that neither dared to answer. Do you believe in love at first sight? Or is it a force of fate that brings two souls together, long before they even know they are meant to be? Could it be that our hearts, too, know something before we do? Something that will change the course of our lives forever? Reflect on that for a moment, as we journey together through this story, where fate has already begun to weave its intricate threads. Would you say love can be planned? Or is it simply another gift from fate? It was a night like no other, and yet it began as a night like any other. The stars above the Irish coast shone brightly, their soft light casting gentle shadows on the world below. But beneath the peaceful surface of the evening, a storm of fate was brewing, one that would sweep both Tristan and Isolde into a current they could never escape. The potion was, in many ways, a simple thing, just a brew like any other. Yet, to them, it became everything. The story of the potion, like so many legends of the time, is one of both magic and misfortune, woven together in a way that could never be unraveled. And like many such tales, it began with good intentions. Isolde, the beautiful princess of Ireland, had already been promised to King Mark of Cornwall. The political alliance between their two kingdoms was meant to bring peace, to solidify the bond between lands and people. And yet, it was not a marriage founded on love, but on duty. In this world, love, especially the love between a woman and a man, was often something that could not be controlled, something that could not be expected, but something that could be manipulated. And so, the potion was created, a powerful, magical brew, one that was said to bring true love between two people who drank it. It was no ordinary elixir, but one meant for a very specific purpose: to bind Isolde to King Mark, to ensure that their union would be one of affection and loyalty, despite the lack of personal connection. But fate, as it so often does, twisted the meaning of the potion. And it was not King Mark who would drink it, but Tristan and Isolde, the very two people whose hearts were never meant to be joined. The accident was simple enough. A mistake in the brewing process, a mix-up that no one could have foreseen, turned the intended effect of the potion upside down. Isolde, standing at the side of her maid, prepared to offer the potion to her future husband. But in that moment, as the two women talked and laughed, the potion, intended for King Mark, found its way into the hands of the one who least expected it. Tristan, the noble knight who had come to Ireland on the king's behalf, found himself at the same time as Isolde. He had been there for a simple mission, to retrieve her for King Mark's wedding. His heart was still full of duty, still focused on his loyalty to his uncle, the king. He had never considered Isolde as anything other than the means to an end. A beautiful woman, yes, but one who was promised to someone else. But that night, when he and Isolde drank from the same potion, everything changed. It wasn't just the taste of the brew that swept over them, but the very essence of it. The magic that coursed through their veins, binding their fates in a way that neither of them could control. At first, neither Tristan nor Isolde understood what had happened. The warmth from the drink, the strange sensation that spread through their bodies, was like nothing they had ever experienced. They felt the stirrings of something deep inside, a pull toward each other, a connection that seemed to stretch beyond time, beyond reason. But it wasn't until later, in the quiet moments alone, that they would realize the full extent of the magic they had unwittingly consumed. Tristan, as loyal as he was to his king, could not escape the pull of the potion. He found his thoughts returning to Isolde, his heart beating faster when she was near. His feelings for her, once dormant, now bloomed in ways he could not understand. And Isolde too felt it. She, who had spent her life bound by duty and expectation, now found herself swept into something wild, something uncontrollable. Her heart, so long held in check by the demands of her station, now beat in sync with Tristan's. But neither of them could escape what was coming. The potion, despite its magical promise, was not a gift. It was a trap. And as the days passed, the consequences of that one, simple mistake began to unfold. Their love was not a love born from choice. It was a love born from magic, from fate. It was a love that neither Tristan nor Isolde had asked for, but one that they could not deny. The potion had created a bond between them, one that was as undeniable as it was dangerous. It was a bond that threatened everything they knew, every duty, every expectation, every promise they had made to others. In the midst of it all, there was an unmistakable truth. They were both caught. Tristan, the noble knight who had once seen his role in the world as one of honor and duty, now found himself torn between that duty and his growing love for Isolde. And Isolde, the woman who had always known her path, marriage to King Mark, a union of kingdoms and hearts, now found herself faced with a choice she had never anticipated. And yet, the real tragedy of it all was not just in the potion. No, the real tragedy lay in the fact that their love, though it was powerful, was never truly theirs to own. It had been created by magic, by forces beyond their control. The choices that had led them here, The potion, the circumstances, the world they lived in were all outside their grasp. They were both slaves to fate, trapped in a love that could never be. As you listen to this, think for a moment, how much of your life has been shaped by forces beyond your control? Have you ever found yourself caught in a situation, in a relationship, or in a moment where you felt that the outcome was not in your hands? Can we truly escape our fate, or is it always waiting for us, just beyond the horizon, ready to catch us when we least expect it? Is there power in the uncontrollable? Can we ever truly free ourselves from the currents of destiny? Or are we all, like Tristan and Isolde, simply swept along by forces much greater than we can imagine? Take a moment to reflect on these questions as we continue our journey through their story. A story born of magic, misfortune, and love that neither Tristan nor Isolde ever sought, but that both would carry with them for the rest of their lives. There are few things as dangerous as a love that must be hidden from the world. A love that burns brightly but must be kept under lock and key, hidden in the shadows where only the brave or the foolish dare to tread. And for Tristan and Isolde, their love was just that, a fire that could not be contained by the laws of society, a passion that was as forbidden as it was undeniable. In the quiet of the castle, behind thick stone walls and beneath the watchful eyes of the court, their love took root. It was not a love born in the open, not one celebrated by songs or whispered about in the great halls. No, theirs was a love that thrived in silence, a love so dangerous that the very thought of it could ruin them both. And yet, it was the kind of love that neither could deny. Every glance, every touch, every stolen moment they shared seemed to carry with it the weight of everything they could never have, and the danger of everything they might lose. Tristan, once a knight bound by honor and duty, now found himself torn between those same obligations and the deep, overpowering emotions he could no longer control. He had sworn loyalty to his uncle, King Mark, to the kingdom of Cornwall, and to the ideals of knighthood. But none of those vows could hold a candle to the fire that burned inside him whenever he was near Isolde. And Isolde, despite her royal status, despite the promises made to her, was caught just as deeply. She was a woman of noble birth, her life scripted by the expectations of her family and the men who governed her world. She had been promised to King Mark, a man of honor, a man who would bring peace to their kingdoms. But in the quiet spaces between the demands of duty, there was Tristan, fierce, loyal, and undeniably hers. Their love, though, was a secret, a dangerous, thrilling affair conducted in the hidden corners of the castle, away from the prying eyes of courtiers and servants, from the watchful gaze of King Mark. Every moment together was a stolen one, every kiss an act of rebellion. They were not free to love, not free to express their desires, for they knew the consequences of being caught would be catastrophic. The very foundation of their world, the delicate web of alliances and responsibilities, would crumble if anyone learned the truth. Isolde, though royalty, was not immune to the pressures that weighed on women in her time. Despite her high status, her desires were still secondary to the needs of the kingdom and the will of the men around her. In the medieval world, a woman's heart was not her own. It was shaped by the hand of her father, her king, and her future husband. And yet, despite the chains of circumstance that bound her, Isolde found a way to fight, to carve out a space for herself in a world that demanded her submission. Her love for Tristan was not an act of rebellion in the political sense, but it was a rebellion against the life that had been thrust upon her. It was an act of claiming her own heart, her own desires, even if only for a brief, fleeting moment. Every meeting with Tristan was a quiet rebellion. They spoke in hushed tones, their words always measured, always careful. No one could know what passed between them, no one could understand the depth of what they shared. Their love was a secret, a treasure they both clung to in the face of the world that would tear them apart. In the shadowed corners of the castle, in hidden gardens and forgotten rooms, they found solace in each other's arms. But even in those quiet moments, there was always a tension, a constant fear that their secret would be discovered. The weight of their secrecy took its toll on both of them. The constant fear of being found out, the need to hide their love from everyone around them, wore them down in ways they could not explain. It was as if every moment of happiness they shared was a step closer to the inevitable collapse of their world. There was no room for error, no chance to be careless. Every smile, every touch, every laugh felt both precious and fleeting, as though they were living on borrowed time. But despite the weight of the secrecy, there was also a thrill in it, a sense of danger that made each stolen moment feel all the more valuable. The passion between them was undeniable, and each moment they spent together only deepened the bond between them. It was a love that was both sweet and bitter, beautiful and painful. The love they shared was not one they could ever own, not in the way that others owned their hearts and marriages. Their love was wild, untamed, and free only in the spaces where no one could see it. For Isolde, there was a strange comfort in knowing that, despite the chains that bound her, there was something in her life that no one could control. The love she felt for Tristan was hers, and it was real. And for Tristan, it was the same. He, too, was bound by duty, by the expectations of his king, his people, and his own honor. And yet, in the quiet spaces between their meetings, in the softness of her touch, he found something he had never known before. It was a kind of freedom, a freedom from the weight of his duties, a freedom from the responsibilities that defined him. In those moments with Isolde, he was not a knight, not a servant to the crown. He was simply a man in love, and that love was all-consuming, all-powerful. But the shadows that surrounded them were never far behind. Every glance between them, every stolen kiss, was a reminder of the danger they faced. They could never be free to love, never be free to live the life they wanted. The world they lived in would not allow it. The cost of their love, if it were ever discovered, was too great to even contemplate. So, they loved in secret, and though it was a love that neither of them could fully possess, it was a love that they both cherished more deeply than anything else in the world. It was a love born of passion, but also of necessity, of the necessity to hold on to something that was truly theirs, even if only for a short time. As you listen to their story, think for a moment about the strength required to love in secret. How many of us have felt the pull of love, only to find that society, family, or duty stood in our way? What does it take to love when the world around us tells us that we cannot, that we should not? Think about the courage it must take to live your truth in the face of opposition, to claim something for yourself when everything around you says you cannot have it. Perhaps this is a question we can all ask ourselves. What would we risk for love? How far would we go to love in a world that seems determined to keep us from it? The heart of every love story contains the possibility of its undoing. The very things that make love beautiful, the trust, the loyalty, the vulnerability, are also the same things that can lead to its destruction. And so it was with Tristan and Isolde. Their love, born in secrecy, sustained by passion, was destined to be shattered by the forces they could not control. The weight of duty, the call of loyalty, and the inexorable pull of betrayal. It had been months since that fateful day at the docks, the day when their eyes first met, the day when they unknowingly sealed their destinies with the magic of the potion. Since then, they had found stolen moments in hidden chambers, in quiet corners of the castle, where no one could see, where no one could know. And for those fleeting moments, they lived in a world of their own making, a world where love was theirs to claim, even if it was only for a short time. But the world beyond those walls was never far away. The responsibilities, the expectations, the promises, these were not things that could be set aside, not things that could be ignored forever. Tristan had sworn loyalty to his king, King Mark. He was a knight, a man bound by honor, by duty, and by a deep sense of responsibility to the crown. His life was not his own. Every decision he made, every action he took was shaped by the weight of that loyalty. He had promised to protect his king, to serve him without question, to uphold the peace and stability of the kingdom. And yet, with every passing day, the line between duty and desire became harder to draw. Tristan knew that his love for Isolde was a betrayal of that duty. It was a betrayal of the promises he had made, not just to his king but to himself. He was a man of honor, a man who had lived his life with a sense of purpose and duty. But love was a force beyond his control, a force that had taken root deep inside him, a force that refused to be ignored. The more he tried to suppress it, the more it consumed him. And as the days went by, the guilt grew, the shame settled deeper within him. But it wasn't just Tristan who was torn. Isolde, too, was caught in the web of her own conflict. She had been raised to be a queen, to be a wife, to serve the kingdom. Her marriage to King Mark was not a choice, but a responsibility, one that she had accepted, even if her heart had never agreed with it. She had sworn to honor her duty, to marry the king for the sake of her people. But she could not deny the love that had bloomed between her and Tristan. It was a love that transcended the confines of her duty, a love that felt as though it had been written in the stars. But how could she reconcile that love with the promises she had made? How could she betray her king, her people, and her family for a love that, by all accounts, was forbidden? And so, with each passing day, the weight of their love became unbearable. Tristan and Isolde both knew that they were living on borrowed time. Their secret was a delicate thing, held together by the thinnest of threads. They had built their love in the shadows, in the quiet spaces between their duties and responsibilities. But the world outside those shadows was growing louder. The walls of the castle, the eyes of the courtiers, the whispers of those who watched them. All of it was closing in on them, threatening to expose the truth. And in that truth lay the greatest betrayal of all. Tristan's sense of duty, his loyalty to his king, began to pull him away from Isolde. It was a slow, agonizing process, but the guilt weighed so heavily on his soul that he could no longer ignore it. He began to distance himself from her, to pull away, to focus on his responsibilities as a knight, as a servant to the crown. It was not that he no longer loved her. It was that he could not bear the thought of betraying the king who had raised him, the king who trusted him. His love for Isolde had become a burden, one that threatened everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed. Isolde, too, began to feel the distance. She sensed the change in him, the way his eyes no longer lingered on her with the same intensity, the way his touch became more restrained, more cautious. She knew what was happening. She knew that Tristan, in his struggle to reconcile his love with his duty, was pulling away from her, and it broke her heart. For her, too, this was a betrayal of the love she had come to cherish, a love that had brought her more joy than she had ever known. But she could not escape the reality of their world. She could not escape the responsibility she had to King Mark, to her kingdom, to the life that had been set before her. And so, in the midst of their love, in the midst of the bond they had shared, came the slow, inevitable unraveling. The betrayal was not a single, dramatic moment. It was the quiet, painful realization that the love they shared could not survive the weight of their worlds. Their love, once so fierce and pure, was now stained with guilt and regret. The secret they had held so dear was no longer something they could protect. And in the end, the greatest betrayal of all was not in the physical distance that grew between them, but in the emotional chasm that slowly widened. Tristan's internal conflict, his love for Isolde and his loyalty to King Mark, tore him apart. He knew that no matter what he chose, it would lead to the destruction of something he cared for deeply. And Isolde, too, faced the same heartbreaking dilemma. Her love for Tristan was true, but her sense of duty was just as real. They were caught in a web of conflicting desires, and neither of them could escape. This, then, is the nature of betrayal in love. A force that is not always dramatic, not always violent, but slow and insidious, eating away at the very foundation of what once seemed unbreakable. It is the choice between loyalty and desire, between duty and love, between what is expected and what is felt. And in the end, no matter how deep the love, it may not be enough to overcome the forces that pull us in different directions. As you listen to this, think for a moment about betrayal in your own life. What does it take to truly forgive someone you love? What does it mean when love, the very thing that once brought two people together, becomes the thing that pulls them apart? Can love survive betrayal, or is it forever changed by the weight of that betrayal? And if you were in their shoes, caught between duty and desire, loyalty and love, what would you do? The beauty of love is often matched only by its potential for sorrow. It is in the quiet aftermath of love's unraveling that we begin to understand just how deep the wound can cut. For Tristan and Isolde, the love that had once filled their hearts with joy and passion now left them hollow, their souls torn apart by the consequences of their choices. The moments they shared, once so vibrant and full of life, had been replaced by an emptiness that neither of them could escape. Tristan, once so full of purpose, now wandered the halls of the castle like a ghost. His once proud armor seemed heavier on his shoulders, the weight of his own grief pulling him down with each step. The knight who had once stood tall, resolute in his honor, now seemed small and fragile, lost in the space he had once filled with his strength. The love that had driven him, that had once felt like the truest thing in his life, now felt like a distant memory, a fleeting moment that had been stolen from him. His heart was a battlefield, torn between the love he still felt for Isolde and the reality of the duty he had betrayed. Everywhere he went, there were reminders of her. The scent of the flowers in the garden where they had met, the echoes of her laughter in the empty halls, the soft glint of her hair in the sunlight. All of it felt like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. But it wasn't just the physical reminders that tore at him. It was the emptiness that now filled the spaces between his thoughts. The silence where once there had been the soft rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. The absence of her smile, her touch, her very presence. He had never realized how deeply he had come to rely on her until she was no longer there. It was as if the very air he breathed had been sucked out of the room, leaving him gasping for something he could never have again. And Isolde, too, was caught in the whirlwind of grief. Her heart, once full of love for Tristan, now felt like a hollow shell, a place where nothing could grow. She had lost not just Tristan, but a part of herself, the part that had dared to believe in a love that could transcend all the rules of the world. She had dared to hope, to dream, and in doing so, she had lost everything. The castle that had once felt like a home now felt like a prison. The walls that had once held her in love now pressed in on her, suffocating her with the weight of her own loss. She wandered the halls, her steps slow and heavy, as though each one took her further away from the person she used to be. The silence that surrounded her was deafening, the echoes of her own thoughts growing louder with each passing day. She had loved Tristan, and now that love was a ghost, a shadow that haunted her every moment. She had lost him, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. The love they had shared had been real, but now it was gone, and in its place was a deep, aching emptiness that seemed to stretch on forever. The pain of separation was not just in the absence of the other person. It was in the loss of the shared connection, the bond that had once made the world feel complete. Tristan and Isolde had once been two halves of a whole, each finding solace in the other, each filling a space that had long been empty. But now those spaces were empty, and no matter how hard they tried, neither could fill them again. The very thing that had once made their love so beautiful, its purity, its intensity, was now the thing that had shattered them both. The world outside, too, seemed to reflect their grief. The sun no longer shone as brightly, the sky no longer felt as blue. The gardens, once alive with the colors of spring, now seemed barren, the flowers wilting as though they, too, mourned the loss of the love that had once filled the air with sweetness. Even the sea, which had once seemed so full of promise, now felt cold and distant. It was as though the very world had gone into mourning, reflecting the devastation that lay in the hearts of Tristan and Isolde. There were days when Tristan tried to focus on his duties, tried to throw himself into his work, but nothing seemed to matter. The swords he wielded, the battles he fought, they all felt meaningless without her. His heart was no longer in the fight, no longer in the honor. It was as though his very soul had been ripped from his body, leaving him adrift in a world he no longer understood. He could not go back to the way things were. He could not pretend that his heart was not broken. He could not ignore the love he still carried for Isolde, even though he knew that loving her now would only bring more pain. Isolde, too, found herself trapped in the space between love and loss. The memories of Tristan haunted her every moment. The soft press of his hand in hers, the way his voice had sounded when he whispered her name. These were the things that clung to her like a second skin, things she could never forget, even though forgetting was all she wanted to do. Her heart longed for him, even as she knew that they could never be together again. The pain of losing him was a wound that would never heal, a wound that would remain with her for the rest of her life. But there was no escaping the truth. Their love, once so pure and vibrant, was now lost to them, and they had no one to blame but themselves. It was not fate, not the world, that had torn them apart. It was their own choices. Their love had been a beautiful thing, but it had also been fragile, and in the end, the very things that had made it so beautiful, its passion, its intensity, had also been the things that made it impossible to sustain. As you listen to their story, think about the idea of loss. How do we cope when we lose something or someone we hold dear? How do we move forward when the love we once knew, the love that gave us meaning, is no longer in our lives? Is it possible to heal from such a wound, or does the loss become a part of us, something we carry with us for the rest of our days? Perhaps, like Tristan and Isolde, you have known the pain of a love lost. Perhaps you have experienced that feeling of emptiness, that space where something beautiful once was. And if so, you may understand that the journey through grief is never simple. It is not a matter of forgetting or moving on. It is about learning to live with the loss, about finding a way to carry the love with you, even when it can no longer be fully realized. Take a moment to reflect on how you cope with loss and what it means to let go of something or someone you cannot have. Can we ever truly heal from such heartbreak, or do we simply learn to live with it? In the quiet stillness of time, when all things must eventually meet their end, there are stories that continue to echo long after the final chapter has been written. The story of Tristan and Isolde is one such tale, a love that refuses to die, a devotion that transcends the limits of life itself. Their love, though bound by the constraints of their world, found its ultimate expression in death, where the two lovers were finally reunited, not as separate souls, but as one, forever bound together in a place beyond time. Tristan's life had been filled with battles, with loyalty, and with the constant tug of duty pulling him in directions he did not always want to go. His love for Isolde had been a flame, flickering in the shadows of secrecy, and though it had burned bright, it had been all too brief. The separation that had been forced upon them, by duty, by betrayal, and by the weight of their own choices, had left them both broken, but their love had never wavered. It had lingered, quiet and powerful, waiting for the moment when they would be together once more. And so, in the quiet moments after death had claimed them both, their love was not lost. It did not fade into the abyss, as so many stories do. No, it remained, strong and steadfast, a love that could not be broken by the barriers of the physical world. Tristan and Isolde, though separated by time and by life's cruel twists, were finally reunited in a place where love knew no limits. Their reunion was not one of fiery passion or dramatic gestures. It was a quiet, peaceful coming together, a quiet promise fulfilled. Their graves, side by side, were not simply the final resting places of two lovers who had been torn apart by fate. They became a symbol, a testament to a love that endured, even beyond the veil of death. It was as if, in that moment, time itself had surrendered to the strength of their bond. The earth that had once separated them, that had once kept them apart, now embraced them both, holding them close, never to be separated again. The theme of undying love, the idea that love can survive beyond the limitations of life, death, and the physical barriers that separate us, finds its clearest expression in this final reunion. Tristan and Isolde's love was not a love that could be confined to the fleeting years of their lives. It was a love that reached across the boundaries of time, stretching out into eternity, a love that could not be severed, no matter how many forces sought to tear it apart. Their reunion, though bittersweet, is a peaceful one. There is no grand triumph, no fiery resolution to the battles they fought in life. There is only the quiet realization that their love, though it had been lost in life, had found its home in death. In the quiet shadows of their graves, they were finally free from duty, from betrayal, from the constraints of the world that had once kept them apart. In death, They were finally able to be together, to live the love they had always dreamed of but could never have. This is the final act of their love story, not one of fiery passion or tumultuous emotion, but one of quiet devotion. Their love, though it had been tested and torn apart by the world, had endured. And in the end, it was that endurance, that steadfastness, that allowed them to be reunited, not just in body but in spirit, in heart, in eternity. The symbolism of their final reunion is profound. It speaks to the power of love to transcend time and space, to endure even when all else fades. It is a reminder that love is not bound by the limits of the physical world, that it does not end when life ends. Love, as we see in the story of Tristan and Isolde, can transcend the boundaries of time, death, and even life itself. Their love, though it may have been lost in the waking world, was never truly gone. It lived on, in the whispers of the wind, in the rustling of the leaves, in the quiet moments when the world seemed to stand still. It was in the hearts of those who remembered them, in the stories that were passed down through the generations. Even in death, their love endured. It was a love that had never truly died, only waited for the moment when it would be reunited, when it would finally find its place in the world once more. As you listen to the conclusion of their story, I invite you to reflect on the idea of eternal love. Do you believe that love can survive beyond life itself? Can it endure beyond the limits of time, of space, of physical existence? Can love, once lost, be found again, even after death has claimed it? Perhaps, like Tristan and Isolde, there are loves in your life that you feel will never truly end. Loves that, even in separation, continue to linger in your heart, waiting for the moment when they can be reunited. What is it about love that makes it so powerful, so enduring, even in the face of time and death? Take a moment to reflect on these thoughts and consider, what does it mean to truly love, not just in the moment but forever? What does it mean for love to transcend all boundaries, to survive even after life itself has passed? As you reflect on the story of Tristan and Isolde, think about the love that lives beyond life itself, the love that never truly dies, no matter how far apart we are. The years had passed, and the love between Tristan and Isolde, though torn apart by the harsh realities of life, had never truly disappeared. It lingered in the quiet spaces between time, a silent promise of reunion, a bond unbroken by the passage of days. Their hearts, once so full of life and passion, had now found their final rest. But even death could not sever what had always been meant to be. And so, in the peace of the afterlife, Tristan and Isolde were finally reunited, not in the fiery tumult of their earthly love, but in the quiet embrace of eternity. The world they had left behind, full of pain, betrayal, and impossible choices, was now distant, a fading memory against the backdrop of a love that had never ceased to burn. Their story, once filled with secrets, longing, and unspoken words, had come to an end, but its final chapter was not one of sorrow. It was one of quiet peace, of a love that had endured despite everything. The world of kings, knights, and kingdoms was no longer relevant. What mattered now, in the stillness of death, was the profound truth of their love, a love that had lived, fought, and survived beyond the barriers that had once separated them. The graves of Tristan and Isolde were a reflection of this eternal bond. Side by side, in the sacred earth, they were finally free from duty, from betrayal, from the constraints of a world that had never allowed them to live fully in their love. They had once been bound by the weight of their responsibilities, by the expectations of others, by the invisible chains of duty. But in death, those chains were gone, and they were left to rest together, eternally. In the quiet of their final resting place, there was no longer any division between them. They were not the knight and the princess, the lover and the beloved. They were simply two souls united at last, in a love that had never truly known an end. There was no longer any separation between them, no longer any conflict, no longer any hesitation. They had transcended the earthly bounds of time and space, becoming something greater than they had ever been in life. An eternal symbol of love's true power, its ability to endure beyond the limits of human understanding. It is said that in the moments before they passed, As their bodies lay broken and their hearts filled with sorrow, Tristan and Isolde had one last moment together, one final breath shared between them. They had nothing left but their love, nothing left but the silent promise that they would be reunited in death. And so it was, in the end, that death did not sever their connection. It only deepened it, allowing their souls to find each other once more, in a place where time no longer held sway. This final reunion, though quiet and peaceful, is a testament to the power of love to transcend all things. It is a reminder that true love does not end when life does, that love, once it has been forged in the fire of passion and devotion, continues to burn, even in the cold embrace of death. Tristan and Isolde's love was not a love that could be measured by time, by circumstance, or by the physical boundaries of the world they once inhabited. It was a love that had always been meant for eternity, and death, in the end, could not take that away. The theme of undying love is not one of grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but of quiet devotion, of a bond that cannot be broken. Tristan and Isolde were not the first to experience such a love, and they will not be the last. But their story, their love, remains an enduring symbol of the strength and depth that love can have, how it can persist even when the world around it falls apart. Their love, now sealed in death, is a love that has stood the test of time, and will continue to stand for all those who believe in the power of love to transcend all boundaries. In the years that followed, their graves became a place of pilgrimage, where people came not to mourn, but to celebrate the love that had endured despite the odds. It is said that on quiet nights, if one listens closely, the sound of a soft melody can be heard rising from their resting place, an echo of the love that had never truly faded, even in death. And though their bodies have long since turned to dust, their love lives on, as vibrant and powerful as it was in life. It is a love that remains, a love that endures, a love that will never be forgotten. As you listen to this story, think for a moment about the idea of eternal love. Do you believe that love can survive beyond life itself? Can love, once it has taken root in the heart, truly last forever, even when the people who share it are no longer here? What does it mean for love to transcend time and death, to become something greater than the physical world can contain? Is it possible that the love we share with others can live on, even after we are gone? Perhaps you have known a love that feels eternal, a love that lingers long after it has left your life. Maybe you've felt the quiet presence of a love that has transcended time, a love that continues to shape you, even when the person you once loved is no longer by your side. It is a love that, like Tristan and Isolde's, never truly ends. It simply changes form, becoming something new, something eternal. Take a moment to reflect on the idea of eternal love. Do you believe that love can survive beyond life, beyond death? And if so, what does that mean for the love we experience in our own lives? Is it possible to carry that love with us, even after we have said goodbye? As you ponder these thoughts, know that the love of Tristan and Isolde, though bound by the constraints of their time, has transcended all boundaries. It lives on, not just in their story, but in every heart that believes in the enduring power of love. The story of Tristan and Isolde is one that has echoed through the corridors of time, resounding in the hearts of those who have encountered it. It is a tale of love that transcends the boundaries of its era, one that has resonated with people of all ages, across cultures and throughout centuries. Theirs is a story of passion and sacrifice, of devotion and betrayal, of the human condition laid bare. Though the world they lived in, medieval, chivalric, and steeped in duty, has long since faded, their love still holds a profound power over us today. The impact of Tristan and Isolde's love story is undeniable. It has inspired countless retellings, each generation interpreting their bond through the lens of its own time. From the earliest versions in the Middle Ages, when knights and ladies dreamed of courtly love and ideals of honor, to modern interpretations in literature, film, and art, their story continues to captivate. It is a story that speaks not only to the deep yearnings of the heart, but to the complex, often painful truths of being human. Their love is not one of perfection, but one of raw, passionate reality, one in which both characters are bound by forces they cannot control, caught between their desires and their duties, their hearts and their obligations. In a world that constantly changes, the core of Tristan and Isolde's story remains remarkably consistent. The love they shared was one that could not be contained by the rules of the world around them, and perhaps that is why it resonates so deeply with us today. In every era, we find ourselves bound by our own responsibilities, by the expectations placed upon us, by the demands of society, family, and circumstance. How many of us have felt the pull of love, only to find it at odds with what the world expects of us? How many of us have faced the tension between duty and desire, between following the path set before us and following the path of our own hearts? Their story, then, is one that invites reflection. It asks us to consider the cost of love, the sacrifices we make for the people we care about, and the difficult choices we must sometimes make in order to honor both our hearts and our responsibilities. Tristan and Isolde's love was beautiful, but it was also tragic, shaped by the limits of their world, by the expectations of their time. They were not free to love without consequence. In the end, their love was lost, not because it was any less real, but because it could not survive the pressures of their separate worlds. And yet, even in their loss, their love remains. Their devotion to each other, though tested by betrayal and the impossible demands of their lives, is a testament to the strength of love that endures despite everything that seeks to tear it apart. In examining the enduring impact of their story, we can see how the themes of love, sacrifice, and the human condition still resonate in modern times. In our world, love is still a powerful force, often one that shapes our choices and actions. But love is also complicated, and the lessons of Tristan and Isolde's story remind us that love is not always enough to overcome the challenges we face. It is the complexity of love, the tension between passion and duty, desire and responsibility, that continues to captivate us. How many times do we find ourselves caught between what we feel and what we know is right? How many times do we long for something that we cannot have, something that seems just out of reach? The tragedy of Tristan and Isolde is that they could never fully be together, not in the way they truly desired. Their love was a fleeting, ephemeral thing, born out of chance and circumstance, and it was only in death that they were truly united. But in their death, their love became eternal. The lessons they impart are not just about the impossibility of love in the face of societal expectations, but also about the enduring power of love itself, the way it lingers long after the lovers are gone, the way it shapes the stories we tell and the memories we cherish. In modern culture, the story of Tristan and Isolde still holds a profound relevance. It is a story of the heart's longing, of the sacrifices made in the name of love, of the deep emotional conflict that arises when duty and desire collide. These themes are timeless because they speak to the fundamental nature of human emotion. Love is universal, and the pain of loss, the beauty of passion, and the complexities of human relationships remain as relevant today as they were in the time of Tristan and Isolde. Their story transcends time, not because it is perfect, but because it is raw, real, and deeply human. The reflection of their love in modern media, from films and novels to songs and art, shows just how enduring their tale is. It is not merely a historical romance, but a symbol of something greater, something that speaks to the heart of every person who has ever loved, lost, or longed for something they could never fully possess. Tristan and Isolde's story remains a reminder that love, in all its beauty and tragedy, is an essential part of the human experience. It is a reminder that, even in loss, love can transcend time and space, and that the bonds we form in this life may never truly end. As you listen to their story, think about the lessons it teaches. What do we learn from Tristan and Isolde about love, sacrifice, and the choices we make in life? How does their story shape your understanding of love and destiny? Is love something that can survive beyond life, beyond death? Do you believe that the love you have shared, or will share, can endure through time, transcending even the boundaries of life itself? Take a moment to reflect on these thoughts and share your thoughts with us. What has Tristan and Isolde's story taught you about love, and how does it influence the way you view relationships, sacrifice, and the paths we choose in life? And if you found resonance in their love story, perhaps you'll want to explore more historical tales of love and loss with us. Subscribe to hear more as we continue to journey through the heart of human experience, where love and destiny intertwine in ways both heartbreaking and beautiful. As we come to the end of the story of Tristan and Isolde, we are left with a sense of both beauty and sorrow, an understanding that their love, though tragically interrupted by fate and circumstance, remains timeless, forever etched into the fabric of human emotion. Their journey was not one of simple joy or uncomplicated happiness. It was a story shaped by the forces of love, fate, betrayal, and sacrifice, forces that continue to define the human experience today. At its heart, the story of Tristan and Isolde is about love that defies the boundaries set by the world around them. It is about two people who, despite all the obstacles, find each other in a way that is beyond explanation, beyond logic. Their love, born of chance and fate, was pure and unyielding, yet it was also vulnerable to the cruelty of the world. In their story, we see that love is not always a smooth, straightforward path, but one that is often complicated by the responsibilities we carry, the expectations placed upon us, and the choices we must make. Tristan and Isolde loved each other with a depth and intensity that could not be extinguished by betrayal, by the constraints of their world, or even by the passage of time. Their love, though marked by loss, never truly ended. It was a love that lived on, both in their hearts and in the hearts of those who heard their story. Fate played a cruel role in their journey. From the very first moment their eyes met, their lives were shaped by forces beyond their control, forces that led them to love each other, but also to part from one another. The love potion that brought them together, though meant for another, became the catalyst for a bond neither Tristan nor Isolde could have foreseen. And yet, despite the unexpected nature of their love, it was always destined to face obstacles. Fate, it seems, is never gentle when it comes to love. But even in the face of these trials, Tristan and Isolde's love remained, a testament to the power of passion and connection that transcends time and space. Betrayal was another theme woven into the fabric of their love. For Tristan, the greatest betrayal was not that of Isolde, but the betrayal of his own heart, torn between loyalty to King Mark and the love he could not deny. Isolde, too, was torn, bound by her duty to the kingdom, to the promises she had made, yet yearning for a love she could not have. In the end, it was not just the love between them that was tested, but their very identities, who they were, and who they were meant to be in a world that demanded so much of them. Their story reflects the painful truth that sometimes, even the most sincere love is not enough to overcome the forces of duty, betrayal, and circumstance. And then, of course, there was the sacrifice. The sacrifices they both made in the name of love were not just of their own happiness, but of their very futures. Tristan sacrificed his sense of self and honor, while Isolde sacrificed the future she had been promised, the security and peace she had once believed would come with her marriage to King Mark. The pain of these sacrifices is what makes their love so poignant. They gave everything for the brief moments of love they shared, knowing full well that it could never last. And yet, in the end, it was their love, so tragically doomed, that became their legacy. They gave up everything, but in doing so, they gave the world a love story that would never be forgotten. A love story that still speaks to us today. As we reflect on Tristan and Isolde's love, we are reminded of the complexities of the human heart. We are reminded that love is not always easy, nor is it always rewarded with a happy ending. Sometimes, love is messy, complicated, and full of heartbreak. And yet, there is a beauty in that. There is a profound truth in knowing that love is not simply something that exists in the easy moments, but in the hard ones too. In the sacrifices, in the choices, in the betrayals, and in the loss. It is in these moments that we see the depth of love, the way it shapes us, challenges us, and ultimately transforms us. Tristan and Isolde's love is not just a story of the past. It is a story that continues to resonate with us long after their time has passed. It speaks to the heart of what it means to be human, to love, to lose, to sacrifice, and to hope. Their story is a mirror to our own lives, where love is often complicated, where duty and desire collide, where betrayal and sacrifice shape who we are. It is a reminder that love, no matter how fleeting or painful, is something that can never be erased, something that continues to live on in our memories, in our hearts. As we come to the close of this tale, I invite you to reflect on the love of Tristan and Isolde. How has their story impacted your own understanding of love and fate? Can you relate to the sacrifices they made, the choices they faced? What does it mean to love so deeply, knowing that you may never fully possess the love you desire? I also encourage you to share your thoughts on this story. How has it shaped your view of love, loss, and the nature of fate? Do you believe that love can transcend time, or is it simply a momentary feeling? And if you were faced with a love so fated, how would you respond? Would you follow your heart, knowing the consequences? Or would you choose duty and sacrifice in the name of something greater? If you enjoyed this tale and would like to hear more stories of love, loss, and the human experience, consider subscribing. There are many more stories, rich with history and emotion, waiting to be shared. Let's continue to explore the timeless nature of love as we uncover the many ways in which it shapes our lives.